If the American people are able to express themselves the way we have been in the past, I think the verdict that we deliver to the Trump regime is going to be absolutely damning. There are a lot of priorities, but one of those is going to be a shift in support for Ukraine. And look, Ukraine is going to be able to hold out. The question isn't will Ukraine survive or not, it's how many people will die as they maintain their fight for freedom.
Hello and welcome to Frontline. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we are joined by Ken Harbaugh, former US Navy pilot and president of Valour Media Network. Ken, thank you very much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Louis. Great to be back with you. I hope you're recovered from our Greenland trip.
Absolutely, yeah, fresh-faced. I wanted to start today by discussing some of what we heard out of Marco Rubio at the Munich Security Conference. Very different from the US's last appearance at that conference, and a pretty big shift from some of those words by J.D. Vance last year. Do you think this was a more conciliatory tone? Because it did hit some of those same notes, didn't it?
I think it was an embarrassment, not just for Marco Rubio, but for the United States. It's going to go down as one of those speeches, not only that Marco Rubio wished he hadn't given, but that becomes a stain on America's honor. And I am ashamed every time I see the recaps of it. I haven't watched the whole thing because I don't think I could bear to. But the very notion that armies don't fight for abstract ideas is, I mean, it betrays such a deep ignorance of America's own history. We fought a civil war over an abstract idea. Our Revolutionary War, no offense to our colonial power, was about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was fought over abstract ideas. And to have the U.S. Secretary of State say that's not something armies fight for, representing the United States, it's a betrayal of our history. It betrays a deep ignorance of what human beings actually fight for. And I hope people remember, because that was nothing more than an audition for the U.S. presidency, the nomination in 2028. And it makes you wonder if Marco Rubio is beginning to believe his own BS. The joke in Washington used to be that he was just biding his time. He was the smart one. He knew the real deal. But I'm wondering if he's not drinking his own bathwater at this point.
And what do you make of this argument that Marco certainly stuck to there, and the US have stuck with since Trump has come to power, that Europe kind of isn't paying its way, and that the US needs to retreat from Europe in order to encourage Europe to kind of fund its own militaries more?
I mean, another deeply offensive idea. You and I were in Denmark together. I believe Denmark paid its way. Denmark had a higher ratio of citizens killed than any other nation, on par with the U.S. after we asked for their help. The only time in history that Article 5 of NATO has been invoked, the mutual defense part of the treaty, was when America asked for help after 9/11 and Europe came to America's aid. You have a percentage of GDP spending in European countries now approaching 5% in the case of Denmark and Poland, I believe. Europe is pulling its weight. And in terms of the moral force they bring to fights like the defense of Ukraine, they're more than pulling their weight. America is the one dragging down the cause of freedom, dragging down these abstract ideas that we used to stand for. I think it is a slap in the face to our allies, and it's not just economic, right? It's not just about pushing for higher GDP spending on defense. It's a moral affront to those who came to our aid. We were in Denmark together after I was invited there as an American to observe this behavior of our embassy tearing out flags planted across the street from the embassy on the sidewalk in these public flower boxes, honoring Danes who gave their lives in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the notion that we would disrespect them the way we did, and then follow it up with the Secretary of State dumping on Europe for not pulling its weight, is, another stain on America's honor.
And were you at least glad to see Europe kind of pulling America back to the issue of Ukraine here, rather than the quite feisty discussions we had heard earlier this year about Greenland?
I suppose, but I remember a time not too long ago. I'm not that old, when America was a global leader, and I remember those days fondly. We are now in a position where the height of the Trump regime's ambition is hemispheric dominance, as if that is some kind of flex. The idea that we're going to control the Western Hemisphere, the Eastern Pacific, and our side of the Atlantic. We're going to give China the Pacific, and Russia gets gets you guys. Russia gets Europe. I mean, that is such a withdrawal from the world stage, and it makes the entire world more dangerous. And we haven't even talked about nuclear proliferation, which is at the center of this argument. The U.S. nuclear umbrella used to be reliable. It kept the world from a nuclear war. We are closer to nuclear war now, with this lack of confidence in American nuclear security and the deterrence that provides. We're closer to proliferation and an accidental or a regional exchange than we ever have been.
Yes, and there are some doubts about where the US and Russia stand on the START treaty. Russia has said it may well abide by the agreements laid out in that treaty. If the US does, it's not really clear if either side are going to stick to that, is it?
No, it's not clear if either side is going to stick to it. The INF Treaty has already gone up in smoke, and it is those intermediate nuclear forces, those shorter range nuclear weapons, that are probably going to be the flashpoint. It's not going to be an ICBM that starts World War III. It's going to be a tactical nuke. It's going to be India, Pakistan. It's going to be some commander in Russia getting a wild hair and launching an artillery-fired nuclear weapon. I'm more worried about the ICBMs when it comes to like global annihilation, but when it comes to the trigger, it's probably going to be something smaller, but still nuclear.
And while all of that is going on, the US is still pushing ahead with talks with Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's heading into another round of US-led trilateral talks today in Geneva, Switzerland. What have you made of the talks so far? Are you seeing anything in that could lead to a peace agreement?
Well, you have only one actor in those talks that is operating in good faith, and that's Ukraine. The U.S. is not operating in good faith, or at least it's operating out of a place of deep, deep naivete and ignorance. And Putin is never acting in good faith. And my greatest fear anytime the Trump administration pushes these sides to the negotiating table is, one, there is just an overt sympathy towards Putin and Putinism. But two, the suggestion that Putin will abide any agreement that America forces the Ukrainians into. It's never been true. I mean, you just have to go back to our insistence that they give up nuclear weapons after the fall of the Soviet Union, and that we would protect them if they did. Time and again, Russia has betrayed its promises, and this time is no different. Unless there are rock-hard security guarantees, which I don't trust the Trump administration to provide, any promises that Putin gives are meaningless, especially if they are conditioned on Ukraine giving up parts of Ukraine.
And you mentioned those security guarantees. They're one of the kind of key issues that are holding up some of these talks. The other main issue, and probably the biggest one, is, of course, territory, specifically the Donbass. Is there anything more you think the US or Europe could do to kind of shift the dial in these talks or in this conflict more widely?
Sure. Military pressure. Russia is losing 1,000 soldiers a day. The Ukrainians want to get that up to 5,000. That is the only language Putin understands. That is the only thing that will actually force concessions, is military losses on the battlefield. And I think we have abdicated our responsibility as a leader of the free world. Europe, thank goodness, is stepping up, not enough. But if we can help the Ukrainians fight, they will be delivering the only message that Vladimir Putin can hear.
And as we said, the US has been pushing hard to bring about some sort of ceasefire. How are the US efforts thought of, though, by the American people on Ukraine?
Sadly, most Americans at this point have tired of the conflict. It's just a deluge daily of bad news. And that is not something most people who don't feel immediately affected, who are not in it, can sustain. I'm able to, because I have friends in Ukraine, but most Americans don't have friends in Ukraine. Most Americans don't feel like they have a vested interest. It is incumbent upon us as the fourth estate to communicate, me as an American podcaster, to communicate to my fellow citizens that this is our fight, that if Ukraine falls, then the Baltics are next, that a NATO ally could very well be next. And that has immediate implications for our safety and security and economic well-being. I think if Americans understood that, they would pick the right side, because even though the Trump regime has its Putin-esque sympathies, the American people do not. Even the vast majority of Republicans are at least wise to the fact that Putin's the bad guy and Zelensky's, if not the good guy in the Republican context, he's no Putin. On balance, the overwhelming majority of Americans side with Ukraine over Russia. But if we can communicate the stakes for America, for America's national security, for our economic well-being, I think we can begin to see that reinvestment of the American people, our interest in the fight that Ukraine is waging for its freedom.
And you mentioned some of those Republicans that back Ukraine still and don't feel any sort of sympathy towards Russia. Lindsey Graham was speaking only in the last few days. He said that he doesn't believe Russia is particularly serious about peace talks. He called for more sanctions, more support for Ukraine. We've also got to think about the upcoming midterms as well. Is there a chance that if there is something of a political electoral shift in the US, we could see less of a hardline view on Ukraine coming out of America and the White House?
You mean less of a hardline view to push Ukraine into concessions?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think we are on the verge of a realignment, which is, I guess, the political scientist term for a seismic shift in how the electorate thinks and behaves. The midterms are going to see a tsunami that is going to wash over the Republican Party and dramatically weaken the Trump regime if the elections are free and fair. That is a serious concern at this point, given the threats being made by the administration. You have the threats to nationalize elections. You have raids by the head of America's intelligence service, who was literally present at a county election office, confiscating voting records. And you have threats to deploy ICE, a regime protection force, around polling places. So these concerns about a free and fair election are very real and very legitimate as we approach November of 2026. But if the American people are able to express themselves the way we have been in the past, I think the verdict that we deliver to the Trump regime is going to be absolutely damning. There are a lot of priorities, but one of those is going to be a shift in support for Ukraine. And look, Ukraine is going to be able to hold out. The question isn't will Ukraine survive or not, it's how many people will die as they maintain their fight for freedom. And in 3 years, again, if we have free and fair elections, we'll have a Democratic president, a Democratic House and Senate, and for the first time in my life, a Democratic Party that is hawkish, which used to be a bad word, but when it comes to taking on Putin and Russia, a hawkish Democratic Party is going to flip the tables in Europe, is going to really change the geopolitical calculus of our enemies around the world. And I mean our ideological enemies, the ones who whose abstract ideas are antithetical to ours, who don't believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am looking forward to that day when the Democratic Party reignites that American beacon of freedom for the world, which is I would argue, dimmed, if not extinguished at this point.
And just coming back to the front lines of this conflict in Ukraine, these talks that are going on have been preceded by massive Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities, up to nearly 400 drones launched by Russia last night. How different is the sort of air warfare that goes on in Ukraine to the sort of things that Western armies have become accustomed to in the last kind of 50 years?
Well, when I brief people in this country about my experience in Ukraine and my analysis of what's going on, the opening and the closing of every argument is if America fights its next war the way it is thinking about warfare today, we'll lose. If America went to war right now with China, we would lose because we are not learning the lessons of Ukraine. I just read that the German army has asked the Ukrainians to come teach them how to fight. In NATO exercises where they have brought in Ukrainian drone units, the NATO armies have been getting spanked because the Ukrainians have invented the new era of warfare, not just defensively. I mean, they're knocking down 92% of these drones. The reason Ukrainian energy infrastructure is getting hit so bad is just a question of numbers. The Russians are sending, in some cases, 700, 800, 900 drones or missiles a night. And if a few percent of them get through, it's devastating. But they're still getting a huge percentage of these attacks that are coming through. Meanwhile, when half a dozen drones from Russia penetrate Poland's airspace or a Baltic nation's airspace, the answer is to scramble a bunch of fighters, spend millions of bucks knocking down 7 drones and claiming it a victory. I mean, if Ukraine had to do that, it would be obliterated. It has figured out how to do it efficiently on the cheap. And we haven't even mentioned the drone war at the front, which is, it's not about these large Shaheds with 300 or 500 kg payloads in some cases. It's not about the Kinshals, the cruise missiles. You're talking about tiny little first-person view FPV drones that cost less than an artillery shell. I mean, that's the amazing thing to realize about this new evolution of warfare, that the most efficient weapon system for inflicting mass casualties for over 100 years, the artillery piece, has been all but supplanted by, and the thing about artillery is it's cheap and it's low tech and it's easy to manufacture at scale. We're building something that's even cheaper and super high tech and even easier to build at scale. And it's killing more people now. And that shift has happened in a few years.
And it is worth noting as well that these long-range drone strikes go both ways. Ukraine also fired hundreds of drones into Russia and Russian-occupied territory last night. Another Russian oil terminal was set alight. What importance should we place on those strikes on Russia's oil export capability?
Well, I think the most important thing to note is that Ukraine is attacking Russia's ability to make war. Ukraine is attacking legitimate targets. Russia is attacking Ukrainian civilians. Russia is attacking preschools and playgrounds and hospitals. And if there's still any doubt as to who the good guy is, just consider that fact. The other reason that Russia has to resort to attacking Ukrainian cities and using its military as a weapon of terror is that it is not making progress on the front. It is not gaining the territory that it needs to. And as an act of desperation or frustration, I don't presume to be able to get inside Putin's mind, but he is launching attacks on Ukrainian cities because his progress at the front has ground to a halt, which tells me that with the adequate resources that we're advocating for, Ukraine can win this thing. And they certainly have the will. They will fight to the last man because they know what happens when Russia rolls in. Bucha happens. I've been to Bucha, and Ukrainians will not abide that, regardless of what America tries to force them to do.
And in fact, reports today suggest there are a series of smaller counteroffensives. This is not something that could lead to a larger strategic breakthrough, perhaps. But there are smaller counteroffensives underway in Ukraine following Russia's ban from the Starlink system. In fact, some of these gains may well be Russia admitting it was exaggerating its own advances in places like Zaporizhia, the oblast there. But how bad for Russia, or any army for that matter, is the loss of a kind of key communication system like this?
I mean, communications is the backbone. Well, they say logistics is the backbone of any army, but communications is how it all happens. Communications is essential for offense, defense, for logistics, for everything. I think the fact that so much rides on Starlink, a privately operated and controlled system, it gives me a lot of concern. The fact that early in the war, a single person with no government mandate from the U.S., Elon Musk, not elected, not appointed, not Senate confirmed, no statutory obligation to the safety and security of the United States, could unilaterally turn off Starlink because he didn't want the Ukrainians to destroy too much of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea. That is very concerning. I think it should be concerning for Europe as well. I'm grateful that he's had a change of heart, I guess, or who knows. Again, not going to presume to get into his mind, as I wouldn't presume to get into Putin's, but he's an ephemeral character, right? And I don't know if Putin pissed him off this week or what, but I'm glad that they are helping. But the fact that it is so unreliable, at some points it's capricious, it's not how we want to operate a 21st century military, at least in the U.S.
Well, Ken Harbaugh, former US Navy pilot and president of Valour Media Network, thank you very much for joining me today on Frontline.
Thanks, Louis. Great to be with you.
Thank you for watching Frontline. For all the latest updates on the war in Ukraine and global security, you should subscribe to this channel. You can also hear us on Times Radio's overnight programming, and you can also find us wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, for the latest news and analysis, you can listen to Times Radio, or you can read the latest news at thetimes.com, and you can go over and subscribe to the Times YouTube channel for the latest news and analysis on all global news updates. Remember, for the latest on US news, you can listen to the Trump Report wherever you get your podcasts, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.